We're delighted to hear from Charlotte Hinchmough, who's the director of ARC, and Charlotte's going to tell us all about the action for the River Kennet and the Pang. They are the Rivers Trust for that. I hadn't realised just how much freshwater species are in decline, so I think this is going to be a fascinating session. Just for some housekeeping, if you could all just make sure that our mobile phones are switched off or on silent, that would be fantastic. But what we'll do is we'll have 20 minutes or so from Charlotte and then a chance for some questions and answers as well. And also I'm reliably assured that Charlotte and her team are out in the nature zone as well afterwards, so I think we can get our hands on some freshwater invertebrates as well, which sounds fantastic. So I'll hand over to Charlotte now without any further ado, and we'll take it from there. Charlotte, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you very much. If you can't hear me at any point, wave. Otherwise, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of rivers, particularly thinking about the Pang, because that's the river that flows through this landscape, and really trying to think of some nitty-gritty things we can all do to help make the situation better. So this is, I often start with this slide because it's a picture of a river with lots of lovely things going on. So rivers, they need a lot of life in them, and much like our gardens, we're very tempted to tidy them up and enclose them with concrete banks and not have too much greenery in the middle of the river for fear of flooding. But actually we need all these things. So a healthy river needs this lovely plant. Ranunculus is a chalk stream, and ranunculus is the stream water crowfoot that kind of characterises a healthy, fast-flowing chalk stream. And rivers are really simple. They don't need very many things, but they do need three things to be absolutely right for them to be healthy rivers. And the first thing they need in them is blindingly obvious, but it is enough water. And you'll know from the news and the fact we're in the middle of experiencing a hosepipe ban that this is a dry summer that has followed a dry winter, and we're in a state of drought. So if you look back at the rainfall records over the last 9 months, we are something like somewhere between 50 and 60% of average rainfall month after month after month, which means month after month we're building this deficit. And when you look at what's predicted to happen as a result of climate change, these long dry periods are likely to become more frequent. And this year we saw the hottest weather we've ever experienced. And if you're an animal living in a chalk stream which relies on cool, constant temperature, these heat waves are a problem. As water gets warmer, it can't hold as much oxygen. So if you're a fish that needs to breathe and your environment is being starved of oxygen, life becomes tricky. So all our water, whenever we turn on the tap, has come out of the natural environment. If you're in a chalk stream area like this, it's come out of the aquifer, that natural underground reservoir that would otherwise be feeding the river. If you're further downstream in Reading, it will be coming out of either the Thames or the Kennet from the river itself. But the water that comes out of your tap would otherwise be supporting a river. So the first sort of easy thing we can think of is everyone has the power to use less water. So we need enough water, but we also need clean water. Sometimes pollution is really obvious. It's a big old shopping trolley, or someone's chucked a bike in, or we do a lot of litter picking, and we found all sorts of extraordinary things, including a safe. We got terribly excited because we thought, this is it, we've made our millions. And then we found a handbag full of jewellery, and we thought, this is it, we've made our millions. And in each case, we were disappointed. So sometimes it's obvious and you can pull it out. Other times it's more insidious. So the picture here, this is the top of the Pang at Hampstead Norwich this year. Rivers aren't supposed to be bright green. They're supposed to be clean, fast-flowing, crystal clear. The typical way of talking about a chalk stream is to describe it as gin clear. This is not gin clear. This flow is 100% treated and untreated sewage effluent, and this is a chalk stream. We are the only country very nearly in the world to have chalk streams, and we don't look after them very well. A less obvious version is this kind of algae that you find in the side. Locally we call it sewage fungus, and it's just a sign that the river's got too much nutrient in it. So all rivers need nutrient, but we've put too much in, and it's coming from all sorts of different sources. It's coming from farms, it's coming from untreated sewage, it's coming from treated sewage, it's coming from septic tanks. All those nutrients, when there's too many of them, upset the balance between the green plants and the algal plants, and we end up with a river that becomes oxygen depleted. The green plants get smothered out, they're covered in an algae that lives on the top of them, they can't photosynthesize, they stop producing oxygen, they die back, there's no place for the fish to live, there's not enough oxygen for the fish to breathe. That habitat that the green plants were providing that supported all the invertebrates isn't there anymore, so there's nothing for the fish to eat, so the kingfisher goes away because there's nothing for him to eat. You know, it's a beginning of a spiral that declines. And then the other thing that, again, harder to do something about, this is supposed to be a gin clear chalk stream, and it's the colour of hot chocolate, and that's just sediment washing in, so it's coming off fields, off roads, off verges, because even all the runoff from the M4, big old motorway, there's a point on the M4 where all the drainage from the M4 is piped straight into the River Lambourn, which is an SAC, SSI chalk stream. Yeah, that's the way we've chosen to deal with the water that runs off. So our rivers are struggling to be clean because we keep putting dirty stuff into them, and it's not a simple problem, it's a kind of systemic problem. It's the way we've designed the system to work. There has been a huge amount of stuff in the news about sewer overflows, so we have just started to realise how much untreated sewage we put into our rivers. This is a snapshot of the map for the River Pang. So this is the Pang Catchment here. So we had 5,316 hours of untreated sewage going into the River Pang last year. I'd like to say that was incredibly unusual. It's not incredibly unusual. And the things that are being measured are just the tip of the iceberg. So the reason this has suddenly come to light is, in fact, Richard Benyon was as a local person, was the Minister for the Environment at the time, and he said we need to start measuring how much sewage we're putting into the environment through these sewage treatment works. So there's a new piece of kit called an event duration monitor that has been installed in hundreds of sewage treatment works across the country. And so for the first time we're getting an accurate picture of how much untreated sewage is going into rivers. And it's really scary. And there's no simple fix, because whatever we do is going to be expensive, and it's probably going to need a different way of thinking. So we're going to have to think more about harnessing the power of nature, in addition to upgrading sewage treatment works, replacing lengths of sewer pipes. So a mixture of green and grey solutions to fix a problem which is on a countrywide scale, but having really noticeable detrimental impact on a local scale. And then the third thing a river needs is good connected habitat. And I put these two photos in because they're the sort of pictures that you would stand on a bridge and look at the river and take a photo and go, well, that's nice. And it is nice. But there's lots of things that aren't so good if you imagine it from a fish's point of view. So let's imagine this river let's imagine we're a water vole in this river. Because of the lights, you can't quite see, but this bank along here is completely solid. It's a brick bank. This bank here is the side of someone's house. It's brick. There's a little island here, and it's edged with wood the whole way around. So if you're a water vole going, right, where can I live? There's nowhere. There's no bank there that you could burrow into and make a hole in, make a little water vole hole to have your house in. There is some green vegetation. That's good. So there would be something for it to eat, but there would be nowhere for it to live. If you were a fish, this bottom here is a muddy, silty river bottom, and this is a chalk stream. A fish like a trout needs a clear gravel bottom because it needs to be able to lay its eggs in that gravel, and the eggs sit there through the winter with the water flowing through them because there's gaps in the gravel. So the gravel needs to be enough for the fish to be able to swoosh out a little basin to lay its eggs in, and then the male fish will squirt his milt on top of them to fertilise them, and then the female will cover up those eggs and they'll sit there. If it's a muddy, silty bottom, either the fish is unable to make that dip in the beginning to lay their eggs, or they successfully lay their eggs, but the silt clogs up all the little holes between the eggs and the eggs just suffocate. So that gravel bottom is really important for the fish to be able to fulfill its life cycle. So just 2 species that would come to this bit of river and go, there's nothing here for me. Similarly, this is a lovely bridge. This is Fobney Weir on the River Kennet. Lovely bridge, lovely view, lovely sound of water. If you're a fish and you want to get to this bit, how are you going to do it? You can't. And we've been doing an exercise at ARC, mapping the barriers to, we've been looking specifically from the perspective of eels, but then thinking broadly to other species, to see whether we can reconnect all these sections of river. Because unless if you have good clean water, sufficient water, clean water, if you can't get to it as a part of the ecosystem, it may as well not be there. So they're the 3 things a river needs. And there are lots of things we can do to help make that better at all sorts of different scales. So I'm going to start at home. I'm speaking to an audience of the converted, but we can all use less water. In England, we have one of the highest per capita consumption levels of Europe. We don't consider water to be a valuable resource. If you leave your hosepipe running for an hour, it will use about 1,000 litres of water. 1,000 litres of water is enough water for you to comfortably do everything you need, washing, drinking, dishwashing, showering, all the other things you might want to do with water, enough for a whole week. And we use that in an hour on our gardens, and it probably costs us about £3 to do it. You know, we do not treat water as a valuable resource, and we need to really rethink that. One of the biggest unseen uses of wastes of water is a leaky loo. And in the olden days, when your cistern overflowed, it came out of a pipe outside and you could see it. And the design of the new toilets is that it gradually trickles down the back of the cistern. So it can go on for months as a tiny, tiny trickle without you really realising it's happening. If you're on a water meter, you'll realise it's happening because your bill will go up massively. But if you're not, it could happen for ages without you really realising. So I urge you all to go home and check. There's an easy way to check. If you flush the loo and then put a little piece of loo roll on the back of the loo and leave it there, it should still be there when you come back next time. If it's not, it's because something's washed it into the base of the loo. So have a check. In hard water areas, in sort of calcium-rich water areas like we are, one of the things that happens is those seals don't completely seal because they get furred up with limescale. So, and you'll need to fix it if that's the case. But check for that because it's one of the biggest quiet losses of water in the system. If you haven't got a low flush or a dual flush system, definitely worth thinking about. We're out on the nature zone and we've got some saver flush bags, which are it's the modern equivalent of putting a brick in your cistern, but it takes the volume out of your cistern, which will help you save water every time you do anything. And it's really thinking through how you use water and what the things you do frequently that if you did better each time would add up to the biggest win. So for some of you that might be reducing the number of times you have a bath and swapping it for a shower, making sure you always run the washing machine on a full load. And for me, it's keeping a jug of water in the fridge because I always run the tap till the water runs cold and then I put my glass underneath it, which I'm always using twice as much water as I need every time I have a glass of water. So, you know, it's all common sense. We can all do it, but we don't always think about it because it's easy not to. So that's to help the river have enough water. Clean water is a big issue. There isn't a single river in England that passes good water quality according to the Water Framework Directive. So chemical water quality, not a single river in England passes. And I challenge you to look under your sink and see how many products in your sink have got this symbol on them. And how many products, even fairy liquid for instance, has got a sentence on the back that says the contents of this are harmful for the aquatic environment. We're merrily using all these things knowing full well that what we flush down our sink is going into the aquatic environment because it goes into a pipe through the sewage treatment works and into an aquatic environment. Sewage treatment works are basic. They are designed to remove poo, pee and paper, that's it. That's what they're designed for. They don't remove complex chemicals. So the simpler you can keep the product that you use at home, the less harm you will be accidentally doing to the environment. We spoke a little bit before about this idea of algae outcompeting green plants. And these are just a couple of pictures of sort of what a river looks like when that balance goes wrong. So this is a close-up of sewage fungus. And this is the whole bed of a river. This is the River Shalbourne, that's just covered in this kind of, there's two sorts growing. There's this kind of horrible sort of pale brown one and then a bright green one on top. But there's not a single green plant in that whole river. And it's just too much phosphate. And phosphate comes off farms, comes out of septic tanks, and it comes out of sewage treatment works. Phosphate is naturally in the environment. It's in all of us. The biggest input of phosphate that we all contribute is every time we go to the loo, we add a bit of phosphate. We can't avoid that, but we can choose products that don't add phosphate unnecessarily. So have a look at your products. The legislation around this has changed in 2015 and then again in 2019. So the regulations have tightened it up, so it's not as bad as it was. But anyone can choose to do phosphate free. So have a look. These are all products that we know are phosphate free. You don't necessarily have to, Lidl do an excellent product, so you don't have to sort of think, oh, I'm going to have to invest more money. It's just a case of reading the label, or worse these days, I find that very often there's no label, there's a QR code or there's a look on the website. So you might need to do a bit of research, but we've done some for you. So these ones you can use and you'll be fine. Similarly, laundry. We kind of approach laundry thinking that everything must be perfectly clean all the time. And of course it must be perfectly clean all the time. But the products we use tend to be the ones that can manage to deal with any stain. And mostly our clothes aren't hideously stained, So I would urge you to kind of be a bit more thoughtful about your laundry and spot treat the things that need spot treating and just wash everything else on something slightly less aggressive. And again, you can choose phosphate free. So as a rule of thumb, washing powders are lower in phosphate or phosphate free compared with laundry tablets. Laundry tablets tend to be the more kind of high tech, more additional chemicals put in. But phosphate free option include all of those. So some of the main brands as well, but often it's the older, so the original products that tend to be the lower tech, lower phosphate. And any of these kind of things you would recognise as being a green product. So there's lots of choice out there. You don't have to go sort of wildly green. You can choose a mainstream product, but you can thoughtfully choose phosphate free and you'll be making a bit of a difference. Doing that alone won't fix the problem, but if everybody did it on top of lots of other people doing big systemic change, we can fix the problem. The thing that's come to light recently, again thinking of those complex chemicals that are ending up in the environment, is flea treatment. As pet owners, we are taught by the marketing people for Spot On and Frontline and all those things that it's very good to treat your dog preventatively to make sure they never get fleas or ticks, which is fine, except they use these unbelievably toxic insecticides, which aren't used in agriculture because they're highly toxic. And the survey by the University of Sussex found that almost every sample from 20 rivers contained this chemical. It's ubiquitous. We've all got dogs. We're all treating using aggressive chemicals on a preventative basis. There are other approaches. You could just treat your dog when it has fleas rather than treat it just in case it might get fleas. Or you can choose other products. So there are other non-toxic options. So this is one. There's another tablet version. There are other options. So have a look at the box and make an informed and thoughtful decision, because these little choices we make will make a big difference. I feel I don't need to tell you never to flush a wet wipe. I'd love to say never buy a wet wipe. I don't think any of us realised when we were buying wet wipes that we were buying a plastic product. The marketing now has gotten a little bit more transparent about the fact that they do not break down. Even the flushable ones don't break down. Flushable to a wet wipe manufacturing company means it goes round the U-bend. flushable to somebody treating water means if you shake it up, it will disintegrate into lots of little bits of paper that will then kind of harmlessly break down. If they've got plastic in them, they just won't break down. They're there in the environment forever. So if you must use wet wipes, they must go in the bin. Wet wipes combined with hot grease are the curse of all the curse of all pipes. We were doing a little exercise with a group of cubs, and we heated up some oil, and we showed that if you put oil in it and then let it get cold, what happens, and how that you can see logically that would clog a pipe. And some child said, "Oh, it's a reversible change of state." And I thought, well, yes, he's absolutely right. It is a reversible change of state. So he's expressed it much better than I could have done. But you know, it feels fine when you're squirting your fairy liquid and your hot fat down the sink. It feels like that's where it's going to go. And of course, it doesn't. It clogs the pipes. And the reason it's an issue if we clog pipes is that then the contents of the pipe overflows and we all end up in a right pickle. I've overstayed my time already, so I'm going to whiz through these, but the third area you can really think about how to making a real change is in your garden, and thinking about how you can make your garden a safe space to catch water and let it soak in slowly. We've kind of grown up with this thought that all water must be taken away quickly through a pipe, and it doesn't. There are all sorts of really imaginative and safe ways you can store water in your garden. So I urge you to look at the downpipes in your house and work out how much of that water you can intercept, either through a water butt to store water so you can use it for garden watering, or to create a rain garden, which effectively is a flower bed like this. This is it in heavy, heavy rain, and this is it when there's no heavy rain. So it holds water for an hour, maybe 2 hours, and then it soaks in slowly. We run a great series of rain garden training courses, so come and talk to us. We can tell you about those. There's a lot of information online about them. But it's a different approach to gardening. Again, thinking about gardening, the biggest opportunity to store water in your garden is to have healthy soil. So one of the things we do is a lot of work with farmers at a farm scale. You can do exactly the same in your garden, and the biggest shortcut is just put a shed load of compost in there. If you've got good organic matter in your soil, it will hold water, it will act as a sponge. And that means the water will go into the soil, it will percolate through the gaps. In this area, it'll carry on down into the aquifer, and it will recharge the aquifer, being the power to keep the chalk stream flowing through the next summer. It also means you have to do less watering. Your plants will be healthier. You know, there's not a downside. Water butts we mentioned earlier. And then finally, in your community, there are loads of ways you can get involved, whether it's really practical litter picking like these people, or whether it's joining as a citizen scientist. If you come and see us on the Nature Zone, we're collecting a list of people to do citizen science on the Pang. The more information we've got, the more we understand, the more we can decide what change is necessary, and the more we can measure the impact of that change. So this baseline data that no one else is collecting anymore, you know, it's the power of citizen scientists that are driving that change now. We work at scale, so where there is habitat that needs improving, we can do it at all sorts of scales. So whether it's kind of something like this, or something with lots and lots of volunteers like this, you know, this is all doable, fixable stuff. And then linking back to that thought about rain gardens, we need to build back wetter. We have broken the water cycle by relying so much on pipes. We've built on floodplains and then thought it'll be fine, we'll just pipe the water down out somewhere, but nobody's really thought about what happens when that gets to somewhere, and so we end up with flooding. We need to embrace wetlands again. They're the fastest declining habitat, faster than even deforestation. They're home to a huge variety of wildlife, but also they clean and filter and store water, and they also store carbon. So putting more wetlands back is a really easy, relatively low cost fix, and could be part of the solution to dealing with a lot of these sewage overflows. Because you can build a wetland tomorrow. It takes 10 years to plan a sewage treatment work upgrade. So build back wetter is our new slogan. And then finally, just thinking about the whole catchment. a river is only as healthy as the catchment around it. So what's happening at the top of the hill is as important as what's happening at the bottom of the hill. So we take a catchment scale approach and look at opportunities to intercept and store water the whole way down the system. That's a tiny snapshot of the things we can do. There is no doubt our rivers are in trouble. We're not in that sort of industrial stage where the rivers were so putrid that people couldn't walk by them without sort of holding a pomander to their nose. But they are not healthy like they should be, and we could get them to be healthy like they should be. And they are our source of drinking water, and there are not many things we can't live without, but drinking water is one of the things we definitely can't live without. So we should be making this a priority. And the fixes are low tech, relatively low cost, and we can all make a difference. There we are. There is hope, I think is my message. There is hope, but we all need to play our part, and we all need to shout at the people who are not playing their part.